Hey everybody, welcome to a bombing science tutorial video. This is your boy Freddy Ferocious, ready to get some things going on this garage right here to teach you how you can work with the can as best as you possibly can go. Now I know what you guys are thinking, shit, I already know everything about this, but that may be not the case. For me, it's taken over 15 years to get to where I'm at, and there's no shame in admitting you might not know exactly what you're doing with the can at this point in time. So we're going to start off doing can control. That's one of the most important lessons that you can have in the graffiti writer skill set. You can then take all the knowledge you know from various can control techniques and implement them into your design, into your piece, your bombs, your tags, whatever. So we're going to first start off with just the general hand motions and movements of how you can really figure out how to use these skills to your advantage in the future. So we're going to start off with the Belton Molotov Premium. This can, Sweat 100 Traffic Red. Beautiful color, very vibrant, just a solid color altogether. We're going to place it on top of this gray background. Gray is a beautiful background for almost all piecing elements. It's a neutral color. It means lights can go over darks, darks can go over lights, and it will jump off the wall in a way that you definitely want to see it. So what we're going to first understand is how to hold the can. Well, probably most of you guys already know how to hold the can, and that's the way you would hold a can when you're painting your furniture or your grandmother's deck chair or anything like that. Similar to the way that you would have it in writing a test or in high school or anything like that. You're going to just use your good hand and you're going to place your index finger over top of the cap like this. Now I generally keep my middle finger around the hook of the can, but some people kind of keep it up top like this, almost like when they write with the pen with two fingers. I like to hold it with one finger, but that's all up to your personal preference on how you want to do it. Now, what's really, really important to remember when you're spray painting on a wall is keeping it directly straight. You don't want to have it going from side to side or wavering in any point, because what you'll notice the second you start to move, then the spray is going to start to move too, and it's going to go in a direction you don't want it to. And the fact of the matter is that similar to taking a piss or a faucet or anything like that, the spray is going to come out in a direct stream. And if you start to waver or move a little bit at all, the stream's going to go in the wrong direction. That means you're going to get overspray, you might get unwanted drips. It's just going to lend itself to being at a place that you don't want to go. So, first and foremost, this is a brand new can, as you can tell. Nothing's even come out the cap. So we're going to shake it up real good. So after you shake up the can, you're going to want to test out the can first and spray it away from the wall so that you don't get any overspray or any unwanted marks on the wall. I mean, we are going to start to get some unwanted marks on this wall as we move forward, but that's just because we're teaching you various styles and we're going to get a little bit dirty. So after you shaked up the can, you're going to then spray it and give it a test. And then after you spray it out, you're going to just see, sometimes you'll notice that the color will change, and it will go from either clear, translucent, or a lighter kind of color of the tone that you're looking for to the color that you want. Now keep spraying until you can clearly see what exact color it is that you want to use. Then you're going to go up to the wall and get into a nice stiff position and begin to do your marks. Now I look at it as being kind of like a sport. Similar to any sort of sport, you got that athletic ability. It's a very cathartic thing, painting graffiti. So with this can in particular, we just got a stock cap on it, which is good. It clears the paint out of the system, and we're going to just begin doing the first couple marks. Now what you'll notice generally with stock caps is that they're not quite as potent or powerful or as crisp as that you want them to have. So noticing here, pretty good line, getting in tighter, it's much, much better. But then the further back you go, it doesn't give you those lines that you're looking for. We're going to explore this more when we talk about different caps and different kind of can controls later on. But the fact of the matter is, stock tip isn't generally your go-to. If you have it and all you got in your arsenal is this, then sure, use it. But if you have access to other caps, probably venture into using those instead. So, in regards to the arm movement, as I said before, when you get into your sort of hip-hop stance, you want to be able to like keep your hands moving up and down, side to side, all in front of you. You'll notice that if you start to waver or your arms start to go too far out of your center of balance, then you're going to lose control of where exactly you want the can. So think about it as if you're, hanging off something. You're going to be in less control than you would be if you were right there standing in front of it or looking at it or being able to focus 100%. So with that being said, excuse me. With that being said, we're going to start to do a couple more lines and just take a look at what happens when you do various lines. Now you'll notice these have all managed to hold up pretty well. That's because this is a very good can. But with other different types of materials, you'll probably get more unwanted drips, but we're still seeing that we're getting some of these unwanted fades here. So with that being said, we're going to change the cap and see where it goes. So we're going to grab another color just so we can go over these lines here and be a little bit more visual. However, when grabbing a new can, just as we did with the original can, and you shake it up, you might want to check, because sometimes some companies have cans that have silly string or silly string type material come out. This can vary depending on a lot of factors: how long it's been sitting in the warehouse, if the temperature is warm, cold, or going from hot to cold. It's not something to get discouraged about. It just means you got to clean out the cap and clean out the can with a lot of prejudice, so to speak. So just keep holding down until you see the silly string kind of alleviating or dissipating from the can, and then keep shaking and then get the color that you're looking for. So for this one, we're going to start off doing some lines with the New York Fat. Now, a New York Fat, it's one of the most classic. I'm sure you've heard about it. If you've heard anything about graffiti, New York Fat is one of the go-to caps. Now, this is generally a fat cap for the most part. However, it can go thin if you use the right technique. Now, if you noticed some of the lines that I was doing there, I was holding them at almost the exact same range that I was with the other cap, with the stock cap. You notice how beautiful and clear this comes out even from a distance. It's got the two sides of the lines, and it even gives you a nice ring in the top and the bottom. And then as you get closer, it becomes even more opaque, and then as you get smaller, it gives you nice, clean, crisp lines. This is amazing to use for a whole variety of different ways. You can use it for fill-ins, you can use it for outlines, you can use it for effects. It's the most perfect cap for almost anything that you need. This is why I generally use it myself. So if you notice how I was standing when I was doing that line, I was in my hip-hop pose, ready for war, and I was starting to move my hands up and down. Again, as I said earlier on, I was keeping my hand completely straight and keeping the cap and my finger completely directed at the wall. With most of these caps, such as the more pencil type tips, being New Yorks, Legos, iron lac, there's a lot of different, you have to remember that your finger is almost going to be directing from the spray. So if your finger's going forward, that's exactly where the spray is going to be. If you notice that your hand is wavering or moving from side to side a little bit, you're going to start to miss the spray in the direction that you want. Let me demonstrate that right now. I'm in my hip-hop pose, ready to paint, and I'm going to do a line, and I'm going to start to move my hand from side to side to give you the idea of what it looks like when the spray is not going directly at the wall. So you notice as I was moving my hand side to side, it was going flaring in these awkward directions that you don't want to happen when you're looking to get a crisp line. You know what? This will come in handy a little bit later, but as we're standing right now, learning on to get the fundamentals and the basic ways that you're supposed to paint, this is incorrect. And we'll touch on that a little bit later on how to use this to your advantage. But right now, let's focus on getting your hands in the right direction and the right way so you avoid a lot of these problems or incorrect lines, so to speak. So also, if you noticed, going from side to side, this is a very low pressure can, which is really, really good for taking your time and moving your hand nice and slow without getting a lot of drips. However, we're going to show you what it looks like if it was a bit more of a high pressure can, or if you were holding the can a little bit too close to the wall for too long. So if you notice there's a lot of unwanted sprays that we're trying to avoid in this tutorial. People sometimes like to use drips with their pieces or various things such as tags and whatnot, but for this instance we're going to try to avoid that at all costs. That's because I ended up holding the can too long, too close to the wall. As I said earlier on, you want about a 5 to 6 inch distance from the wall in your hip hop stance, and then you'll be slowly moving forward to get these various lines going from fatter to thinner. Now, the importance of this is several-fold. Fatter, you're going to want to fill in bigger areas quickly. So that means you're going to be holding the can a bit further away from the wall, and you're going to be moving it in a slower pace in order to get all of it filled in. Now, I mean, you can move in a faster pace and it can be a little bit dustier. That's not that bad, but that's usually if you're doing an illegal street bomb. If you're going to be doing stuff on a legal piece or something more refined or developed, you're going to want to take your time. You're going to want to fill in every aspect of the background or the piece or the 3D. We'll touch on that a little bit more in depth as we get further on in the tutorials. Now, going back to the lines, as you can see, it gets as thin as possible that you can get with this cap, maybe a little bit thinner, but we're just going to use this as the idea that you're going to be as close as you possibly can with the cap, close as you possibly can with the can, and the cap is close to the wall at maybe a 1 inch distance. Now, fortunately, you see that there's no drips, and this is because we used a much quicker speed. If you notice, when I was painting this one, there was a lot of a slower motion with my hand, always guided directly to the wall, just taking my time, but still at a relative pace. As I went through these various lines, I went quicker and quicker down until this one was closest and the quickest to avoid drips and to get as crisp as humanly possible. Now, this is using the NY Fat. As I said before, it's a classic cap. It's useful for almost any different type of aspect of the graffiti scene, using bombs, tags, throw-ups, burners, straight letters, whatever. Now we're going to try to venture into some different caps and see what effects we get with that. So here's a pink dot. This again is a very classic cap, and it's used for fat lines on almost any type of pieces that you can think of as well, both legal and illegal. It's been around for a long time, and it's tried, tested, and true. So we're going to try it on a couple lines right now. So if you noticed with the pink dot, it goes very, very fat, and then as we're getting thinner, it's getting a little bit more runny. Now this is something that I sort of touched on earlier on with the NY Fat, getting into here. Even though you get thin here, you're not getting the drips. Here, on the other hand, we're getting splatter on the side, and then we're also coming close to dripping here. But I fortunately moved fast enough in order for it to not drip. Now, this is something you're going to get a handle on a little bit as you get more advanced or as you practice more. The thing about graffiti is, just like any other sport or craft, the more you practice, the better you're going to get. As they always say, practice makes perfect. So, you're going to want to use a cap like this generally to do more flares or fades or something of that nature. You're not going to usually use this for an outline cap, unless you're going to be doing something really, really quickly and you want that extra space, maybe something like a train or whatnot. But be prepared that there are issues with it and you might get some grips. Now, that all of this is to say that there's no golden rule in graffiti outside of just having fun. So the fact of the matter is, you want to be able to utilize your style and utilize everything that you know in a way that suits your aesthetic or suits your abilities. We'll touch on this a little bit more in letter structure and style, but for now, just make sure as you're going through things, you gotta have fun and you gotta keep an open mind. Now this cap is a super skinny green cap. It's quite good for doing outlines and more thinner effects such as cracks and maybe light drop shadows. So we're gonna go give this a test right now as well. So if you notice, the further back I held it like I was doing with the New York Fat or the pink dot, it was still giving that fade, but a very unwanted looking fade. It didn't have those crisp edges. It kind of almost looked as if we were wavering our hands back and forth. That's just because of the way that it spits out of the cap. As we're getting a little bit closer, it starts to improve, and then it starts to improve further and further. However, if you notice, we're starting to get to a very, very thin point here, which is fantastic for using it for outlines or tags on smaller surfaces. So this is the Bombing Science Skinny Cap. It looks and it handles quite similarly to the super skinny green cap, and is perfect for outlining and special effects on pieces and a variety of more refined or detailed elements. So as we noticed, it was giving us a similar pattern to the skinny cap, but it definitely gets really, really tight as you get in close. And this is perfect for doing various outlines on smaller surfaces, pieces, detail shots, even canvases. So this is a perfect cap in order to use that. Now it's important to remember with can control, as I said earlier on, with the wavering of the hands and the placement of the hands where the paint will go. Now, what I just displayed there was when you hold the can away from the wall or at an angle that's going off of its normal path, it essentially deflects off the wall and then sprays the spray in an opposite direction. This is a really, really neat effect when you're doing things like in your fill of a more refined piece, which we'll touch on later in color theory and fills. But it's good to note this because this can technically be something that you really, really don't want to do or something that you really, really want to do. Because as you notice here, it gives a nice, solid, clean line going across and then kind of wavers off into the background. And as this as a whole, it almost kind of looks as if you're doing a flower or something, which this actually does help out quite a bit if you are doing a flower. This is for us to keep in mind on can control, just as I said earlier on, so that you're not doing this specifically when you're getting the basics down. This is going to be a little bit more an advanced technique, and we'll show you how to use this to your advantage in the future. So we're going to go back to the New York Fat tip, which we originally used, because we're going to start to work on some flares. This is an amazing cap to do flares, because as we displayed earlier on, you're going to want that fat element and then that thin lined element. So let's take a look at some lines. Now if you notice with that, It didn't come out exactly how we were looking for, but it still gives it that element of going from a thicker line to a thinner line, and we've got minimal drips going all across. This is really, really useful when doing hand styles or some various fill effects. Now, what we can also use is a pink dot as well. These give a very nice effect in order for us to get some fill flames. Now in this regard, I would have to say that the pink dot is far superior, but more, instead of doing just a cap review, let's take a look at how we've been implementing this into our graffiti practice via can control. Now if you notice, for both of them, they've got a top fat and a thinner line. This one is definitely a lot more solid with that nice glowy outline to a very, very thin point at the bottom, especially once we got here. So you'll notice how I held it was far away, just as like we were talking about here, getting in our hip hop stance, a little bit further away from the wall, and then starting to spray slowly and then moving the hand fast and quicker closer towards the wall. This is important because as you get faster and quicker towards the wall, it'll give you that sharp point, that opaque point coming down from the sort of oversprayed fat top. Now this is important to keep in mind, and this is one of the few times we do this, especially when we're painting anything like outlines or anything like that. Generally, we want to be in our hip-hop stance, be straight at the wall, and kind of keep it in a similar pattern, going in a certain direction, whichever you so choose for your writing, and also at a similar distance away from the wall all the way through. This is one of the few times that you're actually going to be starting away from the wall, spraying it, and then bringing it down even further. Basically being two different speeds and two different distances from the wall as a whole. This gives that beautiful effect that we were looking at, and this was using the pink dot. So, as you can see throughout this tutorial, there's a lot of different ways that you can implement this in your graffiti practice. And that is to say, you might want to use these fatter caps and these fatter lines in order to fill in pieces or surface areas quicker, such as throw-offs, pieces, straight letters, whatever. The thinner lines, no matter what cap you're using, is generally going to be a place where you're going to do that for outlining. You're going to keep it constantly at the same distance and same speed from the wall in order to give it that nice, clean, crisp, opaque line. And then things like the flares are going to be something that you're going to use probably during hand styles, maybe during fill-ins, or definitely during effects for the fills and burners. But that's going to give you that nice look of going from different sort of ratios of flared or oversprayed to thin and crisp. And this definitely helps with doing hand styles. So let's say you've got the letter L. You might want the top to be a little bit more flared out and then coming into a thin, crisp line at the bottom. This gives a perfect effect for something like an L, a J, an I, or anything else you can think of that's got that sort of bar line starting from top to bottom. Now, all of this to say is you won't be a pro at spray painting overnight. I learned this way, and lots of people learn this way. Other people learn in different ways, and this is where you have fun, rules are meant to be broken, and you implement this in any way you see. Some people might look at this and say, oh man, I don't agree with the way he did that, or that's not how I hold the can, or that's not how I stand. I mean, that's just the way I learned it, and I think that that's a good way to start. But again, you'll start to figure out your own skills, mentality, and techniques as you move forward.